Hillsdale College is offering more than 40, holy mackerel, 40 free online courses. Personally, I'm enjoying Constitution 101, where we explore the Constitution, the challenges it faced during the Civil War, and how it's been undermined for more than a century by progressivism and liberalism. Start your free Constitution 101 course with Hillsdale College. Go right now to levinforhillsdale.com to enroll. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's levinforhillsdale.com. Register for free, folks. Levin, levinforhillsdale.com.
You're invited to take a deep dive into the founding principles of the United States. Join Mark Levin and Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College, as they present Liberty and Learning.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Liberty and Learning, our partner podcast, our network with Westwood One and our dear friend Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, episode number 7. Larry Arnn, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm okay. You know, could be better, but could be worse.
Yeah. Well, there's exciting things going on in the country, so you have to get yourself fully well because you have to fight the war.
Amen, brother. Amen. And let's start from the beginning. Number one, you're a man of education. You're a man of words and letters, as they say. You've spent your whole life learning and teaching. You're an expert on so many things, the Declaration, Churchill, and more than that. We got to know each other about 40 years ago, give or take. Man, that's unbelievable. I remember when we met. And now the Department of Education, which was founded, I believe, in 1978 as a gift to the NEA and the AFT, the nation's teachers' unions. And President Trump wants to get rid of it. First of all, what does it do?
Well, its roots go back, to the 1860s when they tried to start a department, and there was pushback, so they made it a bureau in the Department of Interior. And its job, from then until Jimmy Carter intervened, was to be a clearinghouse for information. As the states run the show, and the Department of Education, the Bureau of Education, gathers up data so they can all have the same data, what each other's doing. Now we have the Mark Levin Show and X and the Internet. We don't need that. What they do now is they give away, hundreds of billions with strings attached. For the biggest dollar thing is the student loans, $1.7 trillion. And the kid who borrows the money is responsible to pay it back. If he fails to pay it back, which is not uncommon, the institution is not on the hook. Instead of financial responsibility, the institution lives under rules. 500 pages of very complex rules that you have to have an expert to parse out, and then still you don't know quite what they mean. So the student loans is actually a microcosm of everything else they do, because what they do is they give some money to states and school districts and schools and colleges, and there are strings attached. So they have substantial leverage over all the education spending in the country, and they drive the system toward uniformity. And so that's what it does now. It's like so much that the federal government does. A lot of the federal government's power comes from what they call the spending clause in Article 1, Section 8, which James Madison said was badly written. The only part of the Constitution I know of that he said that about. Mm-hmm. It's read now as a general license for the federal government to spend any money on anything it wants. There are 17 or 18 clauses in Article 1, Section 8, and they concern national defense and national unimpeded system of commerce and not much else. But now they spend money on a thing, anything, and then they exercise control over the people who take the money. And so the Department of Education is the way education in America is centralized, and it ought not to be centralized. It is not a thing amenable to centralization. So that's why it's so wicked, why it needs to be got rid of.
Dr. Arnn, I notice all these departments. Department of Education doesn't educate. Department of Agriculture doesn't grow. Department of Energy doesn't create energy. Department of HUD doesn't create housing. It's just all so weird and pathetic. Let's dig in even a little bit further. This department wasn't created because it was necessary. It was created because people like Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, they wanted this bureaucracy, they wanted the money, they liked centralization. In other words, they liked the whole progressive ideology, correct?
That's right. And there's at the beginning, way back when there was still idealism reigning in progressivism, it was the idea that if we apply scientific standards to everything in the society can get ever better. There's a contradiction in that in the beginning, right? Because what does better mean? Under the Declaration of Independence, better means self-governing toward living a fully excellent human life. What better means to the progressives is, and this is explicit, whatever we define it to be. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get more power to pursue aims that we will make up as we go according to our will. So that's how it began. And it was a kind of dream. Today, I have a Cybertruck. It's awesome. And, it drives itself, may remake the whole world, and I'm not sure it'll even be good, but I really like my truck. So you can get to thinking, the science that produced that, if you could just deploy that everywhere, into education, into raising a kid, into running a grocery store, into everything, and let the experts be in charge. That's the idea. That's what they thought. And the truth is, things don't work that way. I'm interested in Mr. Elon Musk because he's helping to save the country. I bought his Cybertruck mostly because of that. But if you just look at Tesla for a little bit, it's actually true that it's a whole bunch of people working together, and they like to work there, and the vast majority of the work is done by somebody other than Elon Musk, and he understands that. And so he loves people who could do their jobs without supervision as much as possible. And then they get to live a rich life, and he gets to live a rich life, and not just in money. His life is like my life and like your life. I don't really work with anybody who's not a volunteer to work with me. I can tell you in the college business, the key thing is the kid has got to want to be here and sign up for this work. And that's just an iron rule because the kid has to do the work, and you can only help him. So this whole movement toward bureaucracy is a movement away from human freedom. And that's why it's got to stop.
And by the way, even their own philosophy is internally preposterous. Experts. Really, is that what the civil service is filled with? Experts? It seems to me it's filled with people who don't want to work, who want to stay home. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And aren't particularly expert anyway. Now, that said, so what is the proper role for government/education?
Well, there's a model in the Northwest Ordinance. It's the second of our 4 organic laws. They provide for the way our government has grown across the continent, not by colonies, but by states. People get enough population, petition the Congress, form a state, have the same authority and responsibility as the original states. And it also disposes of the public lands, and those are the greatest asset any government ever owned. The western United States, which at the time of the founding, they didn't even know how big it was. And so they provided in that 1787 Northwest Ordinance and in the previous Land Ordinance of 1785 that land would be sold into private hands as rapidly as possible, with one exception. And that exception was the 16th section of every township, that's 1/64th of the land, would be reserved as a property in the state for education alone. So they gave a massive gift to education that the states controlled. They didn't have to tax anybody for it. And this Northwest Ordinance, this provision of the Northwest Ordinance, was actually extended across the Union until by the time it got to California, it was 4 sections of each township. And that the federal government could do. It could it could give assets that it owns, especially the ones that haven't been taxed from the American people, and let the states do it. What's different about today? Today, the money it gives, the federal government gives to states and localities, looks like free money, right? And so they'll willingly accept the conditions. They don't have to tax it from the people. Somebody else has done that or borrowed it, from the world, the Chinese. And so you want them in control, and you want them to be financially responsible for what they do, too. And then there can be accountability in the system. And because there's 50 states, it means that if one of them goes crazy, they don't necessarily all go crazy. Mm-hmm. And it also means if one of them does great, they don't necessarily all go great, but the competition will be apparent. And that's, a lot of people are moving out of California to go to Texas right now. And the reason is Texas is a better place to live. And the reason for that is entirely the government.
The Northwest Ordinance doesn't get the attention it deserves. It didn't get the attention it deserved in the schools that I went to, the government schools. It doesn't get discussed very much, and yet we've touched on it, and it is a crucially important document for so many reasons. Promoting education, promoting a moral education, and as you say, talking about what's going to happen to these new territories and so forth. So when we return after the break, I want to jump into this a little bit more, at least the moral aspect of what the framers, I think we can say, of our country and the founders, what they were thinking when they did this. You're listening to Larry Arnn. He's the president of Hillsdale College, one of the great scholars, actually. Mark Levin, Westwood One, Hillsdale College, our joint podcast network. The program is Liberty and Learning, Episode 7. You want to check out Hillsdale College, go to hillsdale.edu. I encourage you to do that. That's their mothership. It's got a lot of great information there. Hillsdale.edu. We'll be right back. Time is our most precious commodity, and so many of my listeners have asked for my advice about how they can spend it wisely to improve themselves and the people around them. Well, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. Learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of our Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. Personally, I'm enjoying Constitution 101, and in this course, you'll explore the design and purpose of the Constitution, the challenges it faced during the Civil War, and how it's been undermined for more than a century by progressivism and liberalism. This 12-lecture course is self-paced, so start whenever and wherever you want. Start your free Constitution 101 course with Hillsdale College. It's free. Go right now to levinforhillsdale.com to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com. Register for free. levinforhillsdale.com. Welcome back, America. I'm Mark Levin. He's Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. Westwood One, Hillsdale College Podcast Network partnership here. This is episode 7 of Liberty and Learning. You want to learn more about Hillsdale College, and you really should. Go to hillsdale.edu, hillsdale.edu. Larry Arnn. This Northwest Ordinance of 1787, I don't think it gets the due it deserves. We discussed it broadly, but one of the areas I want to focus on is the faith aspect of this and what it was that John Adams and some of the other folks had in mind.
It is. I said before, it's the second of 4 organic laws in America. The first is the Declaration of Independence. It's the third. The second is the Articles of Confederation. The third is the Northwest Ordinance. And the fourth is the Constitution of the United States. And they used to be printed at the beginning of the United States Code. Donald Trump is trying to eliminate a lot of things from the United States Code. He should probably put those 4 things back at the beginning and call them organic laws. Maybe that's the only thing he should add. But the Northwest Ordinance is very beautiful. First of all, its way is simply breathtaking, right? Because they got all this land. George Washington helped to survey parts of Ohio personally. Their idea is it's going to be states. And this land it's 5 states, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. It's going to be states, and the land was claimed by Virginia. And so, first of all, the method, that is to say, when they get enough population, they petition and become state. They get a territorial government when they get a bit less. That's, there'll be laws, and the laws will be in the hands of the people who live under them. Then that's the whole structure of the thing. And there's no document in history like it. It's just awesome. There are 2 add-ons that are very beautiful. One is the land was given to the Union by the state of Virginia, which had claimed it. That in general, the seaboard original states claimed all the land to the west and didn't know how much that was, because Lewis and Clark returned in 1806. They were flying blind until then. And so this slave state, Virginia, led by Thomas Jefferson, a slaveholder, gave as a condition of the grant that there would never be slavery in the Northwest Territory. Mm-hmm. And that was accepted without controversy in 1787. And then the other beautiful thing is this reservation of land for education. It's the first and should be the only federal regulation of education. It's this sentence: religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall ever be encouraged. So here in Hillsdale Township, the 16th section is less than a quarter mile from the campus. And if you trace it, I haven't done it, but if you trace its deed back to the beginning, it will be that gift from the state of Virginia through the federal government, and the condition on it is that you encourage schools to support religion, morality, and knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that's the first federal regulation of education.
And yet they never thought of this as a violation of anything. In other words, people would say, it violates the First Amendment and so forth and so on. First of all, predates the First Amendment. And secondly, it is compatible with the First Amendment. And I think this is really the big difference, isn't it, between the left and the right, at least in a macro way. That is, you look at the Declaration, the origin of the law is not mankind, whereas they look at things, the origin of everything is mankind. And that's really the big difference, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the left, I think they aim for 2 things that are at war with each other. There were utopian hopes in the origins of the modern American left, which is late 19th century when that happened. In other words, we could just use science and we can perfect the society. What does perfect mean? The answer, whatever we think, our will. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, we have to do it. We, the experts, we're in control. And those 2 things don't go together very well, because we, turns out, whoever the we is, we're just people, and we're not angels. And if we're given unaccountable power, sooner or later, we will abuse it. And that's what's been going on.
Very, very true. So the Northwest Ordinance, I think one of the reasons it's not taught in most colleges, universities, let alone K through 12, is its faith. It's about faith. It's about religion. It's about something bigger than the teachers' unions, something bigger than progressivism itself. And I'm just wondering, as I speak to, how do we return to this kind of understanding of the American founding when the American founding is under constant attack in these public schools and government schools? Is it by increasing competition with K through 12 so parents can make decisions and have more control over where they send their children? Because I think that's pretty much the bottom line. What do you think?
Another way to put your point is the early documents in America are beautiful for many reasons, and one of them is they are obedient documents. The Declaration of Independence itself is obedient to what they call the laws of nature and in nature's God. And on the moral level, faith and reason tell us the same thing. If you read the 10 Commandments, They're all things everybody knows. All things your mother says. In other words, that's the standard. And we will obey the standard. And we will rebel if there's an effort to stop us from obeying it. Those 4 original documents, only one of them, by the way, was not wildly successful. The Articles of Confederation didn't work out. They learned from that. And boy, did they learn, and wrote the Constitution to replace it. This idea that we can take control of everything confuses us with God. One of my colleagues, R.J. Pastrito, along with John Marini, who's the father of the Meth scholarship from 40 years ago, 50 years, when I was meeting you, on progressivism, he wrote a wonderful article about a man named James Landis, who was a lawyer and a college professor and an important progressive. And Landis says that we won't need separation of powers or representation or controls on this new bureaucracy, because they will all have tenure and they will have guaranteed incomes, and so they will have no interest that violates the public interest. And all you got to do is compare that to what Madison said in Federalist 51. Just compare those two things. Madison says you have to have control on the government because men are not angels and angels do not govern men. They actually were claiming for themselves an angelic status. And that's the part that hasn't worked. No one can say with a straight face that the bureaucracy is not partisan.
Nobody can say with a straight face it's not only not partisan, it's incompetent, doesn't show up for work. Maybe that's a good thing. Who knows? It's a good job if you can get one, I guess. Although these days, President Trump's dealing with that, I think, in a very good way. When we come back, we touched on it briefly. I'd like to hit 2 issues, President Arnn, and that's number 1. So where should education wind up? Everyone says in the States. Good. And why is that? Is that because they're perfect? Number 2, what about going forward and a 250-year celebration of this union, of this great United States? How should this be approached, too, in terms of studying and preparing for it? You're listening to Mark Levin, Westwood One, Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, and this is our podcast, Liberty and Learning, Episode 7. You want to learn more about Hillsdale College, go to hillsdale.edu. I encourage you strongly to check that out. It's a beautiful site. Lots to do there, lots that's free there. Hillsdale.edu. We'll be right back. Time is our most precious commodity, and so many of my listeners have asked for my advice about how they can spend it wisely to improve themselves and the people around them. Well, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. Learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of our Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. Personally, I'm enjoying Constitution 101, and in this course, you'll explore the design and purpose of the Constitution, the challenges it faced during the Civil War, and how it's been undermined for more than a century by progressivism and liberalism. This 12-lecture course is self-paced, so start whenever and wherever you want. Start your free Constitution 101 course with Hillsdale College. It's free. Go right now to levinforhillsdale.com to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com. Register for free. levinforhillsdale.com. Welcome back, America. This is Liberty and Learning, Episode 7. Mark Levin, Larry Arnn, Westwood One, and Hillsdale College. Our partnership, and what I think is a wonderful podcast. Episode number 7. So, Larry Arnn, really 2 things here. Number 1, where does education belong and why? Why are the states the best place to handle it? And number 2, how should we prepare to celebrate and then celebrate the 250th anniversary?
Good questions. Well, first of all, the proper sovereign in education is the school where the students and the teachers and the parents are gathered and do the work. And they generally know and frequently love each other, and they do it the best. States are better because they have most authority, although on certain subjects only the federal government has supreme authority. And they're better because it was located there from the beginning. Also, they have to compete with each other. California is a mess right now, and Massachusetts is a mess right now, and Michigan is a semi-mess right now. Maybe getting better, I hope so. And you can go to another state if you want to. So that's why it should be there. Also, the federal government is not designed as an administrative center. And by administrative, what I mean is, all you got to do is look around Washington, D.C., stand on the National Mall, and turn a circle. And every pretty building that you see is original, and every ugly building that you see is new. And the ugly buildings are places where lots of workers in things that look like bureau, like those roll-top desks with the little cubbies on top, they look like that. And those are for many thousands of people to work and control something in detail far away. There actually wasn't a place for that in the original design of Washington, D.C. The way the Department of Education works is it writes rules and which gain force if you take their money, and just about everybody does. And that's just the wrong attitude, and it puts power in the wrong place. There are more employees in public education who are not teachers than the teachers.
Amazing.
And if you just look at any ordinary school, any of our charter schools, that ratio is always 6 or 8 to 1 in favor of the teachers. And, who are the non-teachers? Usually there's a janitor, and usually there's a secretary. And usually the headmaster is a teacher, too. In other words, the overhead and the external control, that's a different kind of government. It's not the same thing as constitutional government. And if we make that distinction, it will help us understand why we got to get back to constitutional government, which is bottom up in its nature. I think that's it. I think that eliminating the Department of Education would be the first step in a great revival where the resources and the energy in education got focused on the student and the school. That's what we got to have. And the parents would be very influential.
Now, this celebration, why is it important? And how do you foresee this unfolding?
So the guide is supplied by John Adams in a letter to his wife, Abigail, on July the 3rd. Quote, he said, we passed this document. It was passed on July the 2nd and signed on July the 4th. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of the continent to the other from this time forward forevermore. Isn't that nice?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I never heard of that before.
He had the eyes to see that they'd done something big. And by the way, when President Trump talks about the celebration of the 250th next July, a year from July, he talks on that scale. He's called for fairs and parades and everywhere in the country. And he's started up a task force of many of the cabinet departments, and they're all encouraged to work on this and put together a big celebration. And I happen to know they're starting to work on that now. So I think it'll be a big deal, and I think it'll be a full-throated celebration. And of course, there'll be the naysayers, and there'll be many of them. And that's good, because there'll still be the full-throated celebration. In Hillsdale, Michigan, I will tell you, it's too bad that the students are gone for the 4th of July, because we don't have a lot of summer school here. It's a very old-fashioned place. But the Hillsdale, Michigan 4th of July parade is a marvel. There's usually a band, and there's trucks, and there's tractors, and there's Little Miss Hillsdale County, and there's, every kind of thing. And the streets are lined, people selling coffee and ice cream. In other words, the spirit of the Declaration of Independence lives on in the spirit of the 4th of July in the towns in America. And I think that will become strengthened, and then, of course, there'll be a great national thing, too. And that's all just right.
And what should colleges and universities do to recognize the 250th year?
Well, most of them should adopt the novel expedient of teaching it. I know it's a radical idea, but the Declaration of Independence is 1,300 words long, I think, 1,400, something like that. It is probably the most beautiful political document ever written. Mm-hmm. It is certainly very beautiful. And to absorb its meaning is good for every soul that does it. And, we dismiss it today because we point out the failings of the founders, which in the document they admit, by the way. And you can only point out their failings with reference to the standards that are named in the Declaration of Independence. It's the reason they treated the whole history of the country, the founding on, as a great experiment, whether we could live up to principles that are perfect, bound to fail, made better by continuing to try. Mm-hmm. And God appears 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. He appears as the legislator, as the creator, that's like a founder, as the divine providence, that's like the executive branch, and as the supreme judge of the world, a judge. The maker of the laws of nature, and nature's God, the legislature. So he's all the branches of government, and he's a founder. And the lesson of the Declaration is that only in those hands would it be safe to place all the powers of government. And sure enough, if you read the middle of it, which is the part where the king did bad stuff, you find out that many of the claims against him is that he is interfered with the prerogatives of the other branches, and he has interfered with our ability to carry on representative government. That means that he's acting like God, and no one may rightly do that. Mm-hmm. You can see in those claims against the king, it's like mirror writing, an outline of what would become the Constitution of the United States, which specifically is organized to prevent all those things. And many of those things we are doing today. And if we read the Declaration, this year leading up to its 250th anniversary, and remember, it is the longest enduring written Constitution in all of history. And it's much compromised these days in the way we go about government. But there's a fierce fight underway right now to restore it. And that means it's still alive. And that's such an achievement. And it stems from the Declaration of Independence.
It's always a great pleasure for me, and I'm sure the audience, to hear our friend President Larry Arnn, Dr. Arnn, President of Hillsdale College. It's really the sort of thing I think students at Hillsdale get to hear, others used to in Claremont and so forth, and it's really very special. And very thankful for our podcast with Hillsdale College. I am Mark Levin, Westwood 1, Dr. Arnn, President of Hillsdale College. This is episode 7. If you want to hear or learn more about Hillsdale College, go to hillsdale.edu, hillsdale.edu. And Dr. Arnn in America, I'll see you next time on Liberty and Learning. What do you think of that?
Carry on, great man.
All right. God bless, my friend. Take care, America. Time is our most precious commodity, and so many of my listeners have asked for my advice about how they can spend it wisely to improve themselves and the people around them. Well, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. Learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of our Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. Personally, I'm enjoying Constitution 101, and in this course, you'll explore the design and purpose of the Constitution, the challenges it faced during the Civil War, and how it's been undermined for more than a century by progressivism and liberalism. This 12-lecture course is self-paced, so start whenever and wherever you want. Start your free Constitution 101 course with Hillsdale College. It's free. Go right now to levinforhillsdale.com to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's LEVIN for Hillsdale.com. Register for free. levinforhillsdale.com.